As a note, I was supposed to say before we got started that we've been having some issues with everybody pressing the green button to speak into their microphone, so make sure that everybody has their green button pressed when you
Can hear you.
Can
hear you.
Your green button pressed? My green button wasn't pressed. So we can. Everybody needs to have their green button pressed whenever we have to speak.
Whether you missed my shirt, you missed my shirt.
We're going to be in order. Proceed, please.
She's trying to hold it back and say, this is what's going on. We need a full, no more temporary.
We have on the agenda today for 2 citizen working groups to give presentations about their respective draft oil and gas ordinances. We also have been presented a proposed draft ordinance from the Planning and Zoning staff. As chair, it is my intention to ask the P&Z commissioners to decide how they want to handle future meetings of this condition. We are not taking any action on any draft ordinance this evening. I will give the 2 citizen working groups 15 minutes to make a presentation. The ordinance group will present first, followed by the science group.
Mr. Chair, are we going to do Agenda 6B, govern the government first, or?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
2 scripts that I'm probably not here. At this time, before this fellow speaks, could we get the government-to-government comment representatives of local governments will be given 3 minutes to make comment regarding P&Z Commission action related to the proposed oil and gas ordinance. Yes, ma'am. You with one of the governments?
Yes, I have a statement on behalf of the Board of Assembly.
Has she been?
This is legislative.
It's government to government, and she's representing the government. And Mr. Chair, I would just ask that she be, if she's going to read a letter from their government, that she be allowed to complete the letter, no matter how long its length is.
Yes. Come on up. Please state your name and. Who you're representing, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Stephanie Cochran. I'm General Counsel for the Pueblo of Sandoval. I have a letter here. We've had a very short amount of time to pull this together for you, so I'm going to read it. We were trying to get Governor's signature. He's approved it. We were trying to get his actual signature. He was left. Was not able to do that. It will be around with his signature, so you'll have a written one into the record. This is a letter submitted under Governor Richard Bernal's signature on behalf of the Pueblo of Sandoval Tribal Council. The County Commission has directed you to draft an ordinance that allows for the preservation and protection of drinking water aquifers, groundwater, and surface water. During your last meeting, Mr. Springfield recommended that you set aside both draft ordinances offered by the CWG and instead to focus on the draft ordinance offered by Commissioner Block. Mr. Springfield deemed both CWG ordinances to be unworkable and repeated his desire that any ordinance be easy to administer. Wouldn't you be able to afford more staff, since the county would be taking in more severance taxes? Should the ease of administration overshadow protecting the county's most valuable resources? There is no discussion on individual items as identified in the first meeting, yet you accepted Mr. Springfield's recommendation, avoiding the directive of the county commissioners. We object to the process you have taken and expect more from our appointed decision makers. We question the risk-reward ratio for promoting extractive industries because our natural resources and our cultural resources are priceless and irreplaceable. We as Pueblo people have a responsibility to be the stewards of those precious resources for generations yet to come. The Pueblo opposes fracking as it competes for our local water supplies. According to a 2016 OCD data, more than 28 million cubic feet of water was used for fracking in 2015. How is the county going to monitor this activity? Activity which has the potential to not only contaminate our water supplies, but eliminate water for our agricultural and rural communities. Despite blanket statements by certain members of this commission that what it decides does not apply to tribal lands, horizontal drilling and fracking affects tribal communities. Pollution of an aquifer does not stop simply because a contamination plume reaches Indian lands. There are 12 pueblos and tribes within this county, comprising upwards of 50% of the county's land base. The new, quote, baseline ordinance, end quotes, proposes that the county provide a notification to tribes within 3 miles of a proposed site. Once notice is received, the tribe has 30 days to review and comment. There is no setback for tribal lands or culturally sensitive areas, just a requirement that the county give notice. The Pueblo has asked for a setback from its boundaries and the river. Our position on this will not change. We also note there is no requirement for intergovernmental agreements on road use across tribal lands. The baseline ordinance fails to provide any process for intergovernmental coordination on such issues as emergency response, compliance with tribal water quality standards, or protections of cultural sites. In fact, the permit may have already been granted by the time the tribe receives the notice and files a comment. Our history as neighbors has been one that has been largely based on our ability to communicate with one another and to respect our shared goals. The Pueblos are very familiar with the 5 basic tenets of New Mexico water law. The first being that all the water in the state belongs to the public. Where the appointed officials of the P&Z Commission fail to fulfill their mandate as given by the Board of County Commissioners, we believe that the matter should be put to a public vote. Thank you.
Ms. Sandoval?
I believe there's another government.
Oh, is there another government? Yes. Yes, sir, please come up. Make sure the green light's on, or I'll get in trouble.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Could you please state your name?
Yes, Chairman. My name is Michael T. Sandoval. I am a tribal council member for the Pueblo of San Felipe. And I'm here to represent Governor Anthony Ortiz. And I'd like to express that he did sign a statement, so I'm just going to read from this statement also. Last year, the Sandoval County Commissioners finally came to an understanding that an oil and gas ordinance which does not adequately protect our groundwater or adequately represent the will of the people and does not include the 12 pueblos and tribes within Sandoval County will not be accepted. When the starter ordinance was voted down 4-1 in December of 2017, a citizens working group was put into place to develop an ordinance that does meet the requirements of the citizens of Sandoval County. The citizens working group is comprised of professionals from the Sandoval County. They have fulfilled their mandate and developed an ordinance, but it is not considered. Further, the starter ordinance, which was voted down, is still being considered and used as a resource. This new block ordinance, which has appeared, is weak on protection and ignores the recommendations of the citizen working group. We require county commissioners to abide by their words, protect the citizens of the county and our water, which is more valuable than either oil or money. We oppose to fracking. We are opposed to fracking. We are opposed to permitting fracking anywhere near the Rio Grande. If you insist on permissive approach to fracking, we insist that the Citizens Working Group ordinance be given priority consideration. This came from the governor of San Felipe. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other government entities that would like to speak tonight? Okay, Mary. Please state your name and your whole spiel.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mary Falloon. I live in Corrales. I was a Planning and Zoning Commissioner for 5 years. I was the chair for 3, so I understand how difficult it is. I also represent the Oil and Gas Accountability Project, but tonight I am representing as the leader of the ordinance team. And my understanding, Mr. Chair, is that you wanted me to comment on the baseline ordinance, essentially. And the first thing that comes to mind is that this is deja vu. This is a Stoddard with a few changes to it. And as we all know, the Stoddard ordinance was defeated by a vote of 1 to 4. And so why is this ordinance being brought forward again is a question that we have. There's a great deal of lack of specificity in this ordinance. It doesn't give staff sufficient direction, which actually could lead to a very dangerous legal standard, which is subject to arbitrary and capricious behavior. If you're not specific enough, then it is left up to the staff to make a determination of interpretation. There are numerous problems, and I could spend literally a couple of hours going through this. As you know, I've been around the block on this issue for quite a long time and understand a lot about oil and gas law, environmental law, and county land use law. But I do want to raise a few points. And as a former planning and zoning commissioner, I looked at the Sandoval County Comprehensive Plan, which is supposed to inspire all of us in terms of when you're considering ordinances, what that plan intends. That was the images of many people in Sandoval County about what they wanted this county to look at. So I'll give you an example. One is that there is really no enforcement provision in this ordinance. There is a maximum of up to $300 fine. I could get fined $1,000, according to the county, for throwing trash in the Passaic. But up to $300 if I violate something in this oil and gas ordinance. I think that it's a serious problem. It's state law, it's understood, but there are things that one can do in case a company violates a noise ordinance, the noise provision, or an emergency response plan, that there are things, there are other options for the county. And for instance, well, let me give you the quote from the comprehensive plan, because I want to do this. The county shall assist state and local agencies in monitoring and regulating industries which have a potential for polluting the environment. There is no excuse to have such a weak enforcement provision on such a heavy industry. And in fact, oil and gas, the responsible oil and gas companies will let you know that the bad apples give them the bad name. And so there is a reason for punishing the bad apples. There's a provision, and I think the Sandia Pueblo mentioned this, the notice to tribe and Pueblo agencies within 3 miles of the site. And of course, notice doesn't mean input. And this is what your comprehensive plan tells you as a guidance for an ordinance. As a large percentage of land within the county is not subject to county control, the county shall closely coordinate land use and development activities with the incorporated municipalities, Indian pueblos, and the state and federal government. And it also says, the county shall, to the extent practicable, work closely with the 9 Indian pueblos, Navajo chapters, and Jicarilla Reservation, located either partially or completely within the county, to ensure that county planning activities are compatible with the planning of the Indian pueblos. There is nothing in this ordinance that addresses this very, very critical issue. There is no water protection in this ordinance whatsoever. There's baseline testing for public wells that clearly are, the intent is to protect Rio Rancho. Well, there's a lot of us in that private wells. And the comprehensive plan says this: Sandoval County shall seek to protect its natural resources and environmentally critical areas from any destructive effects of development. The conservation of water resources shall be a primary consideration for any new development or changes to land use in Sandoval County. Residential densities and commercial and industrial locations shall be regulated to ensure minimal impacts on water quality. Again, this ordinance totally gets an F in terms of complying with the comprehensive plan of Sandoval County. You know, you buy a car and it turns out to have problems. So how much time, energy, and money are you willing to put in before you acknowledge that you have a lemon? When do you give up on the lemon and get a new car? Commissioners, why spend the few meetings that you have to deal with an oil and gas ordinance on this totally inadequate proposal, one that was already rejected in an earlier form by the County Commission? The science team and the ordinance team have literally spent hours coming up with ordinances that are worth your time to review. Both have good, thoughtful provisions, and we are working together to try to merge the two, which is really very exciting. It makes no sense to skirt a process that the County Commission requested you specifically to consider, which is the CWG ordinance. It never said consider under ordinances. And it makes no sense to focus on a lemon when you have better alternatives. All this baseline ordinance amounts to is a paint job when the motor is the problem. Thank you.
Mr. Randall, please come up. Please state your name for the record and your qualifications.
So my name is John Arango. I live in Algodones, and I'm acting chair of the Citizens Working Group. I learned last time when I addressed you, and then just recently when I talked to the County Commission, that since time is limited, it's a lot better to write out my comments rather than reading it, so I'm just going to read my statement. The Board of County Commissioners, in its document creating the Aquifer Protection and Oil and Gas Citizens Working Group, noticed that aquifer protection is the first words in the title that they gave to the Citizens Working Group. Set the objective for the group as follows. And I'm quoting, preservation and protection of drinking water aquifers, groundwater, and surface water, and development of a county oil and gas ordinance. Again, note the emphasis on preservation and protection of water. In the same document, the Board of County Commissioners stated that the end product, that is what they want, the end product of the entire process, including completion of the review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, should be, and again I'm quoting, a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance that includes aquifer source water, groundwater, and surface water protection. The baseline draft ordinance prepared by the Planning and Zoning staff by combining the original staff draft, the Stoddard draft, and the draft submitted by Commissioner Block does not adequately protect and preserve water in Sandoval County. For example, there are no county standards for aquifer protection. Operators are only required to, quote, take reasonable measures to avoid water pollution, but since the term reasonable is not defined, the oil and gas operator is free to decide what is reasonable. The baseline requires regular sampling of water wells within a mile of an oil and gas well, but does not indicate what the county should do if a sample shows contamination from an oil and gas well or associated facilities. Should the county decide that an operator has contaminated an aquifer, it can only take action if it finds that the operator has knowingly and willingly violated the ordinance. It says nothing about how it will handle contamination that is unknowingly or unwillingly caused by the operator. I could go on, but the inadequacies I just described should convince you that the baseline draft does not protect and preserve aquifer source water, groundwater, and surface water as required by the County Commission. Further, the parts of the baseline dealing with oil and gas development are wholly inadequate for the following reasons. Article 3 in the draft describes the parts of the county covered by the ordinance. It makes oil and gas production a permissive use on all land currently zoned RRA in the western parts of the county. It makes oil and gas production a conditional use on all land currently zoned RRA in the eastern parts of the county. It then removes oil and gas development and production as a special use anywhere in the county. Recall that at the Joint Planning and Zoning and County Commission work session a few weeks ago, the potential applicant stated that it was most interested in producing oil and gas in Rio Rancho Estates. Rio Rancho Estates has its own zoning district, designated CD-RRE in the Planning and Zoning Ordinance. The baseline draft as currently written does not regulate oil and gas in Rio Rancho Estates. The CD-RRE zone is not an RRA zone, so Rio Rancho Estates is not covered in the baseline. And because the baseline deletes oil and gas as a special use, any part of the county that is not RRA is unregulated by the baseline. Thus, not only Rio Rancho Estates, but all communities in the Rio Grande Valley that have their own districts, such as Algodones and Placitas, are wide open for oil and gas development production. Also wide open are all other districts, including La Cueva, the Jemez Valley, all of the overlay districts, all rural commercial districts, and all special uses, and all master plan districts, including Diamondale and Placitas. The baseline draft as it currently stands were adopted by the County Commission. Anyone with an OCD permit could drill anywhere in the Rio Grande Valley and the Rio Rancho Estates and in any other district that is not RRA without any approval from the county. There are other problems with the baseline draft, but the fact that it is not a comprehensive ordinance as required by the County Commission, the fact that it does not adequately protect aquifers and drinking water, and the fact that it leaves most of southern Sandoval County wide open to oil and gas development should convince you that this draft needs no further consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
Any comments from the commissioners, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. May I have the floor? Yes, sir. After listening to these comments from Ms. Feldboom and Mr. Arango, and doing my own analysis of this so-called baseline ordinance, I want to make a motion. But before I do that, let me explain the background of why I'm making the motion. At the risk of repeating some of the things that have been said by the representatives of the Pueblos and the two previous speakers, We need to go back to March, when the county commission decided to take a new approach to the creation of an oil and gas ordinance in this county, after it had rejected a proposal in January, I believe, that was totally unacceptable. And this new approach that the county commission came up with was to get an ordinance that was drafted by citizens who would, after all, be affected by oil and gas development in this county. And it also mandated that this ordinance, as has just been pointed out, was to have as one of its key features aquifer protection. So there were only two things that the county commission wanted: citizen participation, that's why it was called a citizens working group, and aquifer protection. Now, I've gone back through the minutes of the county commission meetings in March, and in those discussions, the county commission decided that once this citizen ordinance that was to protect our aquifers was created, it was to be channeled through this commission. And this commission, according to the discussion, was to make a recommendation on the Citizens Working Group ordinance to the county commission. There was nothing in those discussions about throwing into the mix other ordinances by other people. So that was where we stood in March. After that, the Citizens Working Group began the task that had been assigned. And these people, I remind you, all worked as public spirited citizens without any compensation, and whose only interest was in trying to do what was best for the citizens of Sandoval County, for their public health, safety, and welfare. The Citizens Working Group did, because of the philosophical difference on how the ordinance should be structured, broke into two groups. But I consider that irrelevant. Both groups were doing what the county commission wanted: creating an ordinance with citizen participation that protected our aquifers. And those citizens collectively, I believe, spent literally thousands of hours coming up with what the county commission wanted. The county commission gave us a 4-month deadline to get an ordinance in, which expired in July. The science committee of the Citizens Working Group on July 3rd submitted a proposed ordinance to the county. And after that ordinance was submitted, and the reason I mention this is one of the representatives of the Pueblos reminded me that we were told at the August 14th meeting that, these Citizens Working Group ordinances are too complex for the Planning and Zoning Department to administer. Well, after July 3rd, and I believe the first meeting was on July 6th, and then another meeting followed the following week, at which Mr. Springfield and I were in attendance. And Mr. Springfield had at that time, I've got it right here, a copy of the Science Committee ordinance in which he or someone in the Planning Department had written proposed changes all through this ordinance. And I asked him at that time, if we make these changes that you're suggesting, Mr. Springfield, can you say that the Planning and Zoning Department can administer this ordinance? And he said yes. He said yes. And I made virtually all the changes that he had suggested. But now on August 14th, he comes up with a totally different story that, oh, that ordinance is too difficult to administer. So I'm in kind of a quandary as to what the truth is here. So anyway, the Science Committee submitted its proposed ordinance. The first meeting of this commission was scheduled for July 31st. And I came to that meeting fully intending that we would be discussing, as the county commission wanted, the Citizens Working Group ordinance that had been submitted. And I must say I was very surprised, if not shocked, on July 31st when we came here. And the first thing that we were told was we were not going to be considering one ordinance, not two ordinances, but 5 ordinances. 2 from the Citizens Working Group, which I consider legitimate, and 3 others. The Stoddard ordinance, which had been voted down by the County Commission in January, something called the OCD reviewed ordinance, which has been sitting on a shelf somewhere since March of 2017, and nobody has ever considered, and an ordinance presumably created by County Commissioner Block. So we now have 5 ordinances that we were told we were required to consider. Now, this commission never voted on that. We were simply told that was going to be the case. And then in addition to that, we were told that we were going to use the so-called matrix idea that was handed out to us. This matrix being a document that lists the 5 ordinances and then has some 18 specific items that we were supposed to consider for inclusion in an ordinance. And as I understood the proposal, to shorten this up, we were supposed to go through each of the 5 ordinances, pick out from each a section that we liked the best for inclusion in an ordinance, and then we were going to create some kind of a hybrid ordinance out of all these various sections. And this is something else that this commission never voted on. We were simply told that this was going to be the case. So we left the July 31st meeting, and the next meeting was scheduled for August 14th. And I came to that meeting believing that, well, we were going to continue with this matrix idea. And again, I was totally surprised. We had an entirely different scenario presented to us. This matrix idea apparently got thrown into the trash heap without any explanation. It's just disappeared. And what we were told on August 14th was that the Planning and Zoning Department wanted us to recommend to the County Commission the block ordinance. And we were told that the block ordinance was really good because it split the county up into districts, and it made oil and gas development in the eastern part of the county a conditional use. And then I pointed out that, in fact, the block ordinance did not do that. It was fatally flawed, and what it actually did was make oil and gas development a permissive use throughout the entire county. Something that the county commission had voted down in January. And then we were told, Planning and Zoning Department knew all along that there was this flaw in the block ordinance, and they really planned on correcting it. Well, I find that very hard to believe, because that ordinance was in the possession of the Planning and Zoning Department for more than 3 weeks before August 14th. If they knew there was a problem with it, they could have corrected it before August 14th. That's just a sidelight. Anyway, this commission then authorized the Planning and Zoning Department to try to do some surgery on the block ordinance and correct the defects in it. And so now we're here on August 28th, And we're now handed a so-called baseline ordinance, which is the surgically corrected block ordinance. And you've already heard from representatives of the Pueblos and from representatives of the Citizens Working Group that there are really significant problems with this baseline ordinance. In my estimation, it does not do two things that the county commission wanted. It doesn't have any citizen input, and it does not provide aquifer protection. And I will be happy to debate that with anyone who wishes to take up my challenge. It just does not provide aquifer protection. So here we are, 3 meetings into the process, almost 2 full months into the process, and what have we accomplished? We've accomplished nothing. We haven't considered what the county commission wanted. We haven't considered a citizen ordinance, and we haven't considered an ordinance that provides aquifer protection. I apologize for running on so long. Apologize to the other commissioners and to the members of the audience, but this is a matter that I feel deeply about. There are very few places in our society today where you see true examples of Jeffersonian democracy. Jefferson's idea, if you'll remember your history, was that the government would be run by volunteers who were not paid anything. People who would devote their time for the benefit of the public as a whole. And then in these days of professional politicians, you don't see that much anymore. But it is here with the Planning and Zoning Commission, because the people who are on the Planning and Zoning Commission are volunteers. They don't get paid. They don't have any axe to grind. And presumably their goal is to do something for the benefit of the people. I think that ought to be preserved. And I don't think it's being preserved here by the way things have been handled. I think we have been pushed without any votes into a position where we are almost being required to consider an ordinance which we really haven't even talked about in any detail, which doesn't meet the county's criteria for citizen participation or aquifer protection. And I think the way this has been handled to get us into this position is really insulting and demeaning to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because all this has been done without any votes, and it's an attempt to usurp the authority of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Let me point out something to you. This Planning and Zoning Commission has statutory authority from the state of New Mexico and from the Sandoval County Commission. Under state law, section 3-21-21 of the New Mexico statutes, the state outlines the powers that are given to a Planning and Zoning Commission. And subsection A of that law says, the commission, referring to a Planning and Zoning Commission, shall have the power to regulate and restrict the use of lands for trade, industry, residence, or other purposes. Oil and gas development is an industry, and this commission has the authority to regulate, not the Planning and Zoning Department or anybody else other than the county commission, which is obviously over us. So, having said all of this, it's my opinion that this whole process has gotten off track. And we need to get it back on track to do what the county commission asked to be done. that we consider an ordinance or ordinances created by citizens that protect our aquifers. And for that reason, I want to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that this commission exclude from consideration hereinafter any ordinance that is not an ordinance created by the Citizens Working Group, that all of the work sessions of this commission hereinafter be public meetings at which public participation is not only requested but is desired, and that this commission report out to the county commission only one or both of the Citizens Working Group ordinances that have been submitted to date. That's my motion.
Amen. Discussion, Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, well, I think at the last meeting, I expressed myself, and I must say that Peter kind of did it a little more eloquently than I would. And I still hold myself to those opinions.
Mr. Staff?
Mr. Chair, could I just ask you to maintain order in the House, in the dais here?
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
And
Chairman, you need a second.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the attorney, because this isn't on the agenda, is this something we could even consider?
This commission can take no final action on any item. What is on the agenda is a discussion for drafts. In previous meetings, for discussions of draft ordinances, you've taken votes on particular items, and the way that it was phrased by Commissioner Dang was that he wants to exclude any discussion of any other ordinances. So it would be appropriate for us if you want to move forward. Absolutely no final action can be taken. What is improper or inappropriate for Mr. Dang's motion is the public comment or the public input of this is being dictated by the county commission through a resolution, which the resolution has said that live oral public comment shall only be on an agenda in which final action is going to be taken. And so when this commission when the chair decides to set an agenda in which final action shall be taken, that's when that meeting or all meetings in which final action is on the agenda, public comment will be accepted. So that section of what Mr. Dang's motion said is in violation from the resolution from the county commission.
Are you, Madam Attorney, are you talking about the portion of the motion that involves public comment at future meetings?
Yes.
If it's your advice that is not appropriate, but that the remainder of the motion is appropriate, I'll withdraw that section of the motion.
It's appropriate for you to decide as a body how you want to move forward discussing a draft, then that in a future meeting or drafts, you can decide how you want to vote on final action. But at this point, there's nothing on the agenda which is a final action. You can vote like you did in previous meetings on, do you want to consider, I believe we just said, there'd been a vote, do you want to divide the county into sections? That was a vote. And so sort of how do you want to proceed in creating language that will be sent to the county commission? If the chair or the commission wants to vote in other ways, that's fine, but absolutely nothing on this meeting is going to be a final action. And any decisions that you make can be up for further vote on a further day. But what you're going to send to the commission, to the county, full board of county commissioners is not on the agenda today.
Correct. This, as far as I understand, this is procedural, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Staff, any other comments?
Had to get the button on. It's a lot to swallow at one time. I've just now received the 2 papers from Mr. Springfield and from Commissioner Dean. Since my computer has not been functioning for the past few weeks, this is the first time I've seen any of this, so I would like time to think about it, if that works.
Commissioner Brown?
First, I want to thank the Citizens Working Group for all their hard work. The level of detail in here is, I can tell you've put a lot of effort in it, and I do appreciate that. But some of the detail that concerns me is that, again, we are repeating what other agencies are already doing. And that's something that I've tried to avoid. If this was a standalone and the only document, it would probably work very well. But I think there's a lot of restating, maybe is the word, of what OCD and other governmental agencies are already responsible for and monitor. And so there's a few things that concern me with it. And I'm sure we'll go through all these and talk about them. But I think a lot of this, like I said, is wonderful detail. But as I go through it, a lot of my questions are, is this already covered in OCD? Have they met that requirement before they come to us to ask for a permit? And if they have, why are we going through this again? It just adds too much to a process that they've already done. Why are we having to repeat it? And that's probably one of my largest concerns. One of the Citizen Working Group, now I'm on my, just for clarity's sake, I'm on my 3rd Citizen Working Group copy now. It's a revised draft of, I think, the non-science Citizen Working Group. And I'm going through it now as well, because that's a fairly new document as of this week. Like I said, I think this has got a lot of good stuff, and we can definitely take some from it. But I do think if we look at it, we'll see there's a lot of redundancy here, and that's one of my concerns. And then for the science group, outright banning of a particular type of production, I can't agree with that either.
Commissioner Stoner?
I'll refer over there first and then we'll talk in a minute.
They've already spoken.
Okay. Keith, those are good comments, Commissioner Brown, but we've all put a lot of work into all of this, and I would like to see us keep all our options open when we're moving forward. As Keith said about redundancy and what we can really monitor and what the P&Z staff can do. The reality is, if we did everything in here, how could we afford to do that, or where would that come from? And are we just duplicating and spinning our wheels? So, Mr. Springfield, do you have any comments on?
No, sir.
Okay. I don't want to take everything off the table. I'd like to see us work through all the ordinances and get to the best ordinance for the community that we can.
Mr. Chair, I believe there was a motion but no second, so if you want to take any action, you would need a second before you move forward.
Could I get a second, please?
Second. Second.
Ms. Martinez, would you call the roll?
Keith Brown?
No?
Peter Dane?
Yes.
Jeff Stamp?
No.
James Medina?
Yes. Yes.
Dan Stoddard,
No.
Horacio Herrera.
Yes. In a tie, the motion fails. Could I get some
You
discussion?
three who voted no should be ashamed.
Could I get some commissioner comments on where you would like to proceed from here? Commissioner Moreno?
I can't respond right now in this short period of time because I'm not sure how we should proceed, okay? I was confident that we should have proceeded with the two ordinances because it fit every challenge that was set forth by us from the county commission, okay? And I'm disappointed that we didn't take those two and go with it.
Commissioner Stout?
I can't believe that there's nothing worth considering in the other three ordinances.
Oh, God. Really?
I'm saying
Sir,
that there's
please.
nothing
Really?
that we
Ma'am,
can use.
Please, if you can't keep control of yourself, you'll be asked to leave. Okay?
So I would agree with Commissioner Stoddard. If we're going to incorporate the two citizen groups' reports and recommendations, which I believe we should, I still think we need to temper that with what is in the other ordinances that have been proposed. There will be a way to blend them together, and I think we need to take the best of all of them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ida?
Well, actually, I think I've already expressed my opinion. I'm disappointed that the motion didn't carry. I would comment in response to Commissioner Brown's comments, which were well taken. I don't object to them. If there are things in the citizens working group ordinances that are duplicative of what other state agencies do, or which may not be necessary to carry out the purpose and intent of those ordinances, I think that's what we have the power from the county commission to do, is change those ordinances in such a way as to make them operate more efficiently. So it seems to me Commissioner Brown was actually saying we should do what the county commission mandated. Review those ordinances, clean them up if necessary, and report them out to the county commission. So that's my response.
Thank you, Commissioner Day. Commissioner Brown?
Well, I'm more than willing to discuss some of the citizen working group things that the ordinance, this latest version, some of the specific areas of concern that I don't think are maybe are redundant or unnecessary. I mean, for example, the definition section, again, if this was the only document ever written and there weren't other agencies involved, wow, the level of thoroughness, I kudos. I mean, the definitions in here, for example, are very, very clear. My concern is I would have to have the legal folks review this as well, make sure, hey, is this already in some OCD definitions? If it is something different, then, and it should be included in the ordinance, I think I'm all for that, if it is not clearly defined somewhere else. But if it's clearly defined somewhere else, and you know, if I do that, that is, I mean, you know, when I wrote papers in college, I always wanted more pages. It made it look like I was better, but I mean, there's a lot, there's, you know, 8 or double-sided pages here of definitions, again, I think because they're being very thorough and wanting to provide those definitions, and I understand that. But if it's already provided, I don't believe it's necessary. There are several things about the application process, and it's interesting, it's an interesting concept here, how they've broken up into exploratory versus actually production. What I would ask is, does OCD already have two separate processes for that? And, where do these things overlap? I mean, there's interesting questions in here. But is it covered by OCD? And if it is, then it's simply a statement, like many of the statements we see in the baseline ordinance, in accordance with. And then you refer to the document that has the authority. So we're not contradicting each other. Another area that I heard it mentioned tonight about the pueblos and about their cultural sites and stuff not being considered, but at least the version I have does reference that. That things, in fact, there's a standoff distance for cultural resources as identified by the State Historical Preservation Office, which I'm assuming, and I'll have to look to Michael for clarification, that Pueblo sites, cultural sites are in that registry, or they would be the ones to tell us that they're already in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think that's addressed.
Of course, it's not a complete listing because there are other sites, as I understand, that are
Secret
correct.
sites.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
They don't want people just getting this book and finding where the sites are and then going and spoiling them. So there are secret sites that aren't listed on that.
And that, I think, that was the intent for the notification of the Pueblos, is to allow them to identify that at that time?
The intent of notification is exactly what it says. It's to notify them that an application has been brought before the county so that they can put their comments in regarding that application. It's open-ended. It's similar in language to that's in the subdivision ordinance, and that's where we pulled it from. And it is notification. It doesn't restrict the kind of comments that are tried to give us.
And this is a question for you again, Michael and Ms. Cherry. You can tell me shut up, but
We're back till 7:30.
okay. Michael, I guess as far as how things are handled on the Pueblos, because there's a lot of oil production on the Pueblos from what I understand, is there any kind of notification that they make to you? Is there any kind of communication from the Pueblos to the county about impacts to water or any of those same type of things that they're requesting from us?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm just curious if this was it went both ways. Okay. There was another concern I have is because of the nature of how passionate people are on either side of the aisle, if you will, about oil and gas development. The pre-application meetings. Now, in the areas that are permissive, that is, I don't think that would be reasonable to do that, but in the conditional areas, there is an opportunity for the public to have comment during that. Am I not correct, Michael?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm just going through things that kind of caught my attention. Application fees. This is the first time that I've noticed this. It is about $10,000 for an application. Is that something there? Are they referring to what would be paid to OCD or to the county? And this $10,000, is that where does this fee come from? I guess?
As I understand it, it would be an application fee to the county.
Okay. Are we allowed to charge application fees of this type of money? Because I know finding, we could only do $350 or whatever, that was, which was very small.
That's a state-required penalty in zoning enforcement. You cannot go above the $300. I hear, and if you do go through this process, I'm very interested to hear the ways that you can get around that state law, and you can do all kinds of different things in a zoning ordinance to charge more money, but I don't think that's possible, but we're being told that's possible. In terms of application fees, I'm not aware that there's state statute that limits the amount of money. Somebody could protest if you can't tie the amount of the application fee to the amount of work or the cost to the county. So we watch those very carefully. We try and be able to justify the cost.
Okay. Now, OCD, if they were to do some infraction that violated the laws and that are already out there, OCD has the ability to fine them larger amounts than $300, I assume.
I can't speak specifically to the costs that they can. They do have enforcement mechanisms up there to enforce insurance and other penalties.
I know, and maybe I missed it in the baseline plan, there was a mention in the Citizens Working Group about the opportunity for appeal and then expiration of permits. Maybe I missed it in the baseline plan, but did we include those as well?
Appeal is in there. You have two sections that will be within the zoning ordinance. You have the standard appeal section that's already in the zoning ordinance that covers all appeals. And then you have language that was submitted by the county attorney's office that talks about stay of
Wasn't here when
permit applications. So while appeals are going on, you have to stop or not go forward.
And I didn't know, okay, good. I didn't notice anything about expiration of permits. I think we discussed those at one time.
We don't have expiration of permits within the standard zoning ordinance. Typically, when you try and sunset something, you do it on a case-by-case basis as that comes through. The master plan, for example, out in the Rio Puerco was sunsetted at 5 years. So you do that on a case-by-case generally.
So I guess my thought on this is, I thought this was a creative and a good idea, personally, just to, if someone does apply for a permit, if they don't take action within a certain amount of time, that it would automatically expire. And I'll just throw that out as something that as I went through the Citizen Working Group thing, I thought was a good idea that maybe we could consider and add. Like I said, I'm just hitting some high points, and I won't take all of it.
What are you thinking, Commissioner? Building a fourth ordinance?
No, I think the baseline is just that. It could be a good baseline. But there are some things that I like in the Citizen Working Group that I think we should definitely consider adding. For example, the sunsetting, if you will. But there are many things that do concern me, like the wanting to charge them for road maintenance and types of things like that. Any other industry we don't do that to, and they pay road taxes. The larger vehicles have to pay more taxes to drive on the road. I have driven larger trucks, just personal trucks, and had to pay more. So I know that they pay that, gas taxes, etc., to maintain roads. And I think, and I've been in North Dakota, I'm stationed in North Dakota, and some of for the oil boom that's occurring up there, that was some of the best maintained roads where you knew you were on a road that went to the oil or gas facility because it was the best roads in the state. Because I believe the state in its own interest will maintain the roads because there's profit from them. And I saw that in North Dakota, and I hear the same in southern New Mexico. So I can't, unless we plan to equally, hold, I'll just throw a name out there, who probably has more trucks than about anybody else on the highways, a Walmart distribution center, for example. They definitely put a lot of wear and tear on our roads, but we don't charge them additional fees and require them to maintain roads. And I don't think it's, even though some people may find the industry unpleasant, we still should punish them because of that. And I think I'll just stop there. I probably talked long enough on some of the things that I like and some of the things that I have concerns about.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Springfield, what's on our next agenda in 2 weeks?
Whatever the planning commission tells me is on the next agenda for the.
So it's open right now, except for
It is
discussing.
open right now.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the commissioners if we could consider doing just a workshop using all these ordinances.
That's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
That's exactly what you're doing right now.
I think that's what
If
we
you
just
want to keep doing,
keep doing it, but the workshop without public comment like we did that one time, okay.
That's what this is.
That's what this is. You would formally have to make a motion to bring an ordinance or ordinances for consideration for actual action. You'd have to vote to do that. Then we would have to advertise, we'd have to put an agenda together that actually allows for that. Then, as the resolution by the county commission stipulates, then you can do public comment.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask all of us as commissioners to go back and review all the ordinances, make our own opinions of what we think should or should not be in there, reach out to staff if we have any questions, as Commissioner Brown brought up a lot of questions. And when we come to our next meeting, let's try to make some progress.
So if I understand correctly, Commissioner Schreiber, you want to formulate another ordinance based on
No,
the
sir. No,
block
sir.
ordinance?
Mr. Chairman, I think we all need to go through, as Keith just did a little briefly, we need to personally go in depth and be able to come here at the next meeting and start chipping away at this to what we feel is going to work for the county.
I have a suggestion to the commissioners. I think that the block ordinance has its merits. I think that the citizens ordinance group ordinance has its merits. I think that the science teams group ordinance also has its merits. I believe we beat this horse enough. I believe that the county commission, who has a vested interest in each portion of each of those ordinances, would be better qualified to cut and paste, because that's what they're going to do anyways. It's my suggestion that we send them the 3 ordinances and let them do exactly what Commissioner Brown suggests. Not at our level, because we don't really have a true vested interest in each district. But each commissioner does have a vested interest. ICO has a vested interest in the north. Each has a vested interest within their constituency. And it's my idea that we send the 3 up to the commission and they decide on how to act. Can I get some discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend is that we put a little more meat on the bones of the baseline ordinance based on what we we've learned from the citizens working group one, and then submit that as our primary, however, submit all the other ones as well for their consideration. If there's something else that they would like to add, then they can do it at that time. But I think it's really in our responsibility to provide them with a very close to final version of ordinance. Because I agree that they're going to make any changes they see fit. But I think that it's our responsibility to give them one that we recommend you go with this, however, consider these other inputs, and then they can do as they wish.
Commissioner Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we can vote on that kind of a proposal tonight. I think that's a substantive matter that would require a public meeting with public comment. So this discussion, I think, tonight is probably academic. I would certainly oppose submitting to the county commission the baseline ordinance, the block ordinance, whatever you want to call it, however it gets massaged to the county commission as our primary recommendation. I think that thing is so fatally flawed that it could never be enforced in the manner in which the county commission wants it enforced. That's my observation.
Please, we don't have much time.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out that the agenda for Planning and Zoning Commissions is your discretion. That's the chair's prerogative to set the agenda. So you would set the next meeting on how you wish the Planning and Zoning Commission to proceed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Day.
I have no comment.
So, can I get a motion to push all three ordinances up to the county commission, propose in the next meeting with full public comment, with no one ordinance being taking precedent over any other, and allowing the county commission to cut and paste as they see fit?
I think we should defer to the chair's wishes on this. I don't consider it as being that dramatic, and so I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Martinez, can I get a roll?
Sir. Marcio Herrera,
Yes.
Keith Brown,
No?
Dan Stoddard,
No.
Peter Dane,
Yes?
James Medina,
Yes.
Yes.
oh, Jeff Stack. I'm sorry,
Forgot me.
Mr. Sam.
Yes.
Okay. And the motion is carried.
So the motion is carried.
Okay, let me understand what you have a motion that you want to put on the agenda for consideration, discussion, and recommendation to the county commission, the three ordinances. That's an action item.
Yes, sir.
You'll have to have public comment on that, of course. So we will do the agenda as such. We will advertise as such, and that's the way we'll go.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn? Seconded? All in favor?
Aye.